Good evening, friends. Back again, reading passages from Inner Work of Adat Hashem, the teachings of Rav Ashlag. We are on page 109. Anything we do for our own benefit is considered material. Involvement in wisdom and even involvement in Torah is considered material as long as it is rooted in serving ourselves. Only when we begin to disconnect from the desire to receive and go in the direction of attaining the desire to give are our actions considered spiritual. So, pretty clear, anything we do for our own benefit is considered material. Gashmiut, material. Opposite of spiritual, and involvement even in wisdom and in Torah and even in spiritual practice of any kind is considered material as long as it's rooted in serving ourselves. If it's for our own benefit, if it's to serve our pleasure, if it's even to serve our liberation, although that's the highest form of going for it, but even if it's to serve our personal egoic benefit in any way, even if it's for developing the mind and gaining wisdom and knowledge, it's all considered material, it's all considered serving ourselves. Only when we begin to disconnect from the desire to receive and go in the direction of attaining the desire to give are our actions considered spiritual. When we're going for spiritual practice as a practice of serving the divine, for the purpose of serving the divine, for the purpose of fulfilling the divine will, then that is considered spiritual. When we're working to separate from our self-centered, separate self-consciousness and all of its desires and quote-unquote needs, and we're separating from that self, we're working to create distance, to observe and recognize how we're motivated by our own self-satisfaction, self-serving desires, and we wish to attain a level of desire to give, we wish to attain union with the divine, to see things clearly as they are so that we can be in service and help bring about the Geula, the redemption, the revelation of God's divinity within every single moment, every breath, every moment. That's when our actions are considered spiritual. Our desire to receive does not disappear, parentheses, even though we sometimes pray for this because we want to be done with the struggle, end parentheses. If the desire to receive were to disappear, we would be in need of a big doctor. The sages teach that the higher the spiritual level, the greater the desire to receive. The desire to receive remains, but we become able to transcend it. God becomes more important to us than our desire to receive. Right, so as we've talked about before, you can't disappear your desire to receive, because at the fundamental level, our bodies are in a state of wanting to receive. The atoms and the molecules want to stick together, the atoms want to keep in motion. So fundamentally, we can't get rid of our desire to receive. It's fundamental to our nature. We may pray for this sometimes because we want to be done with the struggle. We recognize the desire to receive or separate self-consciousness is a barrier to unity consciousness, to serving the divine, to fulfilling our purpose. So we may pray for the desire to receive to disappear. But if the desire to receive were to disappear, the Ram is saying we would be in great need of a big doctor. We would be in need of a doctor because we wouldn't be alive anymore, essentially. The sages teach us that the higher the spiritual level, actually, and we've talked about this before, the greater the desire to receive, right? So right now, if you consider your desires, you desire ice cream, you desire chocolate, you desire, sweets and treats, you desire savory foods, you desire physical pleasure, you desire emotional pleasure, intellectual pleasure. So all of these, they're like, you could map out the quantity of the desire to receive, how big it is compared to what it is you're desiring to receive. As you go along in the spiritual path, actually your desire to receive increases because now you're wanting spiritual states. Now you're wanting union with the divine. You're wanting these really much, much larger desires to be fulfilled. So the desire to receive actually increases the higher the spiritual level that you go. So the desire to receive remains, but we become able to transcend it. And how do we transcend it? Because the higher we get on the spiritual level, the more connection to the divine, the greater the pleasure of union we're receiving. At some point it flips, or at many points it flips, and the more actually we see how amazing God is, and how important God is to us and to life and to existence, that becomes more important. That God and serving God and helping transform consciousness and helping heal the world becomes more important than our desire to receive. That's how we, quote unquote, transcend our desire to receive. God created us to give us goodness. The goodness is experiencing God, right? Fundamental teaching that we've been talking about. God created us to give us goodness, to give us the greatest pleasure imaginable in life. That goodness, that pleasure is experiencing God, is experiencing a union with the divine. The more we realize God's greatness, the more we experience joy. Right? The more we recognize how awesome it is to be here, how magical reality is, how amazing it is that everything is the divine, everything is God, and God's light is constantly shining on us in this whole magical mystery tour of existence. The more we realize how amazing this all is, the more we experience joy. The more we experience joy just to be here, just to breathe, just to eat food, to drink water, just to be alive in the simple pleasures of life. We are so much radically more joyful for us. Beyond awareness of God's greatness is realizing the awareness comes from God. Beyond awareness of God's greatness is realizing that the awareness comes from God. So first there's the awareness of God's greatness, like we're talking about how magical, how amazing, how awe-filled everything is. And then beyond that is realizing that awareness itself, the awareness of the awesomeness, also comes from God. That awareness comes from God. And so it's just like another inner realization and inner grokking of the magical and magnificence of creation and existence. I want to jump back to that previous passage just to give one more example. Like, the more we realize God's greatness, so the more we realize how magical it is to be here, how everything is sacred and everything is full of God's light and energy, like the more we experience joy. So if you imagine like eating an apple, and an apple is this fruit that comes from the earth, that comes from the cosmos, and you may get joy from it now because it tastes good, it's crisp, it's crunchy, it's delicious. But the more we realize how that apple is full of God's light, the more joy we get from eating it. The food itself becomes like an act of love-making to God. We're eating God, we're making love to God by eating this food because we're eating the light itself. We're getting the spiritual light. We're consuming, ingesting, becoming one with the spiritual light itself that is contained within the apple. Final passage, there is no situation, thought, or reality that does not come from God's desire to bestow goodness. Right? So because everything in the planet, everything on life is moving towards union with the divine, is set up from the beginning, from the thought of creation, it's conceived within it the plan to give joy, to give the greatest pleasure on earth to human beings. Because everything was designed within that, there is no situation, thought, or reality that does not come from God's desire to bestow goodness. Every thought, every situation, every reality comes from God's desire to bestow goodness. Even if it appears to be the opposite, fundamentally within it is the desire to bestow goodness. So that's on that fundamental level you could see. And also you could see that every thought, every situation, every reality has within it the possibility of tikkun, has the potential within it for repair. So everything that seems evil and dark and hateful has within it the opposite of that. It has within it the repair of that, the sweetening of that. And so within it, no situation, thought, or reality does not come from God's desire to bestow goodness. Okay, have a wonderful night. We'll see you tomorrow.